Welcome to Bosco Campus Vision. You're watching the campus television channel of Don Bosco College, Kottayam. This lecture is on the prescribed syllabus of 5th semester BA English Literature and Language. Paper is Literary Criticism. This lecture is part 1 of the lecture on Sir Philip Sidney. Birth year is 1554 and death year is 1586. Sir Philip Sidney was the representative of Renaissance criticism in England. Besides being a public servant, he was also a man of letters of great reputation. He was a typical Renaissance man, soldier, statesman, courtier, scholar, poet, and critic. Sidney's critical treatise was probably written about 1580, but it was posthumously published in 1595 under two separate editions: the Defence of Poesie by William Ponsonby and An Apologie for Poetry by Henry Olney. The manuscript itself might have been without a title. During the Renaissance, discussion on literature touched just 4 areas of literary culture. First, the art of poetry in verse. Second, treatise on poetry and poetics. Third, treatises in the nature of answers to specific charges. And fourth, apologetic essays in defense of the art of poetry. Obviously, Sidney's Apologie belongs to the fourth type. It is said that the Apologie was written in response to Stephen Gossen's The School of Abuse, attacking poetry and plays, containing a pleasant invective against poets. Invective, that is a harsh accusation against poets. Poets are called pipers, players, jesters, that means one who jokes, and such like caterpillars of the Commonwealth 1579. Gossen's this pamphlet was dedicated to the right noble gentleman, Master Philip Sidney, Esquire. Sidney's Apologie happens to be the first English text, complete and comprehensive, propounding a set of principles on the art of literature. Apologie is carefully crafted in the form of a rhetorical argument, and the pattern is clear for analysis. Sidney follows the general oratorical method made up of narration, proposition, and proof. Apologie falls into 7 broad divisions. First, exordium, that is the introductory section of a narration or discourse. Second, narration, describing the antiquity of poetry. Antiquity, that is the ancient times or faraway history of poetry. Third, proposition, that is the poetry is imitation. Fourth, division, that is religious, philosophic, imitative, etc. Fifth is proof. Sixth, refutation. Refutation, that is defense, the speech act of answering an attack on your assertions. And the last one is peroration, that is the concluding section of an oration. In Sidney's Apologie for Poetry, he defends poetry against the attack of Puritans. Firstly, he defends poetry on the ground that it is the oldest, the earliest, and the most respected form of composition. In Greece, even the philosophers appeared under the mask of poets. Poetry was respected even in the barbarous and uncivilized societies. The ancient Britons had its poets called bards. Such is the antiquity of poetry. Romans had great respect for poetry and poets. Their names for a poet was Vates, which means a diviner, a foreseer, or a prophet. Greek also honored poets. They called a poet a maker. The origin of the word poet is poiein, which means to make. English people joined the Greeks in calling the poets makers. According to Sidney, a poet is a maker and poetry is the art of representation. Sidney defines poetry as poetry, therefore, is an art of imitation. Aristotle also called poetry mimesis, which means representing, counterfeiting, or figuring forth. Metaphorically speaking, it means a speaking picture with this end to teach and delight. That is, according to Sidney, poetry is an art of imitation of nature and its function is to teach and delight. Sidney points out that all art imitate nature, but poetry presents things better than in nature. The poet creates forms such as never were before in nature. His heroes are superior to the forms found in nature. The poet makes more pleasant rivers, more beautiful and fruitful trees than are found in nature. The poet, with the force of divine breath, brings forth surpassing things than the creations of nature. Sidney classifies poetry into three: religious poetry, philosophical poetry, or moral poetry, and the poetry dealing with the imaginative treatment of life are the main kinds. In this lecture, we studied about Sir Philip Sidney and his important work, that is an apology for poetry. Do the given exercise and submit on time. Thank you.